Hello, and welcome back to Legend of the GLORIO Heroes. You're listening to episode 29 of the premiere watch and recap podcast for the legendary 1988 science fiction OVA. I'm your host, G, and with me, my trusty cohort, Iro.
Hi, I'm still here, and I think I can hear all of our listeners laughing at us after some of the things we were saying last week.
Well, that is the glory. That is the appeal of our podcast. We do not watch the next episode previews, thanks to some advice we got, and we record each of these podcasts before we watch the next set. So we never we go into these recordings with no clue what happens next, and
All right, no foresight.
yeah, could you forgive us for being naive enough to think that Yang and Reinhard would have even made it to the meeting?
I know, right?
But we'll get into that in the recap itself. We have a we have an interesting trio of episodes to discuss this week.
Boy, do we!
Yeah.
Boy, do we!
What are they called, Iro?
Well, let's see. Episode 82 here is titled "The Magician Doesn't Return." Episode 83, After the Festival, and episode 84, A Triumphant Return in Disappointment.
Yeah, so kind of we're gonna do our best to kind of pump ourselves up here, kind of keep this podcast the entertaining brand that you've all come to know and love. But it's hard this week, y'all. This is a hard trio of episodes.
When episode 2 opens with like the first proper like cold open of season 3, like skipping the opening, playing the piano version so we can stick some more footage in there.
Yeah,
you know some shit's about to go down.
Yeah, this season, I think we've noted this before. This season kind of had less cold opens than season 2, but when this OVA decided to bust it out, we knew that something big was about to go down this week.
Yeah, and so everyone on Iserlohn, after sleeping for like 48 hours straight, finally convenes to talk about the message they received for the peace talks.
Yes, they talk about how, like, in many ways, this is like Yang has achieved his strategic goal in this battle. This was the original objective. Like they had no illusions that they could actually beat Reinhard, like in a fair fight, and that all of this battle was basically to try and drag the Empire into diplomacy. And so this is in many ways this is the ideal scenario. Of course, Murai here, rightfully points out that I wonder if basically Murai, Schenkopp, and Poplin basically have the exact conversation that we had at the end of the last podcast.
Yes.
About if this is a trap being set by Reinhard. Like we have Schenkopp saying that like that wouldn't be Reinhard's personality. I don't think he would do that. Poplin helpfully points out that while the Kaiser might not do that, the Kaiser's subordinates are another entity, entirely. And like a lot of those guys are a lot more
bloodthirsty.
Yeah, especially when it comes to Yang Wenli.
Yes, so, seeing as how every third person in the Empire has sworn a blood oath to kill Yang Wenli.
Yes, but point is that one way or another, this is a risk they have to take because
yes,
they, as we kind of saw with the last battle, like. It's I want to say I always wanted to say that like in Yang's entire career Reinhard could never beat him, but like I think if I'm being entirely fair, like if we count Vermilion as a win for Yang, then like on some level like I think we have to begrudgingly admit that like eventually this battle would have been a win for Reinhard. Like like it would have taken a long time. It would have probably there would have been a lot more casualties, but like eventually Reinhard's wave tactics would overwhelm
Yes.
Yang's fleet. So like in many ways, this is the respite that they have so desperately needed. Meanwhile, we kind of return to the Empire side of things, where
Yes.
we find out that Reinhard's ceasefire was surprising for like even the Imperial forces.
Yes.
Like everybody, including us, your podcast hosts, were
Right.
surprised that Reinhard would call for this. It was so out of character that we were
Actually
almost
sent
like,
by Reinhard.
yes,
They
we find out
confirmed.
that we found out this week that Reinhard did indeed send that ceasefire order. However, the reasoning, a little worrying.
Reinhard tells Hildegard that he had a dream of about Kirky Eyes, and Kirky Eyes admonished him in his dream and asked him to not fight anymore with young Wenli.
It's a little
we
much.
We all kind of side-eye each other.
Yeah. Basically, Reinhard sees Kirky Eyes in a fever dream, and thankfully, Dream Kirky Eyes stays in character with the real Kirky Eyes because, convinces Reinhard to abandon this war, or at least to speak with Yang Wenli. And this is the thing that I think we say time and time again. Like, yes, like authoritarianism has like its advantages, but like I feel like. And like this time it worked out for us, but I feel like this exact event is exactly why we should all be deathly afraid of despots who hold all the authority.
He completely did a 180 on like his policy
on a whim, literally on a whim.
Yeah,
and that's really dangerous. Like that's like that one person just.
What if he decided to turn? Like, what if he had a fever dream with Oberstein, and Oberstein was like, take away all of the welfare.
Right.
And Reinhard's like, oh man, okay, I guess Oberstein told me to in my dream, and so I guess I'll do that. Send out the order.
Yes, it's a little worrying, and again, this is why I kind of speculated last week. I wonder if Reinhard's health is all there, even when he's not sick. But anyways, so. He calls for the ceasefire. We kind of get a scene with Mittermeyer and Reuenthal. I think Mittermeyer is concerned about this plan because he is concerned that like maybe Fahrenheit or Steinmetz, the two admirals that were killed in battle in the last 3 episodes, that their subordinates might be out for blood. That there's a high chance that like despite Reinhard sending that order, that like. There are elements of Reinhard's own like admiralty who,
would just kill that guy if they had the chance.
Yes, pull a gun on Yang at the negotiation table, and
Reuenthal suggests that they could just wait it out, wait for Yang to die on his own instead of trying to kill him.
Yes,
yes. That the same goes for the Reich. That if they wait long enough and the Kaiser dies, then there's no telling what the stability of the Empire would be.
Yes. And so there's this idea that no, we cannot just build a wall around Iserlohn and just like wait it out. Like we need to end this conflict one way or another. Meanwhile, we kind of return to Iserlohn, where kind of Yang decides that okay, like I'm gonna go meet with Reinhard because like. That's what he wants. Like, even if it's a trap, we gotta take it. Julian offers to be the bait. He offers to kind of meet with Reinhard in Yang's stead, but Yang, says that like Reinhard would see that as an insult. Knowing Reinhard and kind of who he is as a person, he would insist on meeting Yang, as an equal.
Yeah.
So Yang's gonna have to go with him.
Like they're in a precarious position because if they like do anything that Reinhard could construe as disrespectful. It's totally within his rights to just remove the possibility of peace talks.
Yes. So basically, Yang is kind of at a disadvantage here. He has to basically, as we find out with this conversation, we find out that, tragically in retrospect, that this conversation is about basically Yang explicitly approaching the negotiation table with his hands tied behind his back. Like, everybody, including Julian, kind of volunteers to be like the guy, like to accompany Yang on this negotiation.
Kind of go down the list from the big names down to the B team.
Right, like Schenkopp, Poplin, like even like
Murai and Kazanu and
right. Everybody basically volunteers like, hey, I'll be your adjutant. I'll follow you to the talks. And like everybody keeps like shouting down those ideas because like, no, Schenkopp, you can't go. You are like the commander of the ground forces. Kazanu, you handle logistics. You have to stay here. Blah blah blah.
Frederica's ill in bed.
Yes, like Poplin.
Poplin's too much of a loose cannon.
Right. I like that. Like Poplin, I doubt they're gonna need a fighter pilot in this like, peace talks.
We need somebody with the good sense of Murai to stay behind and make sure nobody flies off.
And there's this idea that, like, I mean, in some ways, it's a heartwarming conversation because it's just like everybody here is important, everybody is needed, you know. Like,
but also, like I feel like this is when I absolutely realized what would happen in this episode. Is
yes, you realize that something is about to go wrong because Yang is not bringing anybody important with him. You know,
no shade on Patrushev or Blueheart or Sewell, but
they are the three that are assigned to go with Yang Wenli to the peace talks.
Yes,
and
I'm not saying they're not important, but they're kind of not that important.
Right. The notable thing is that these are three characters who are like characters that we are aware of. We know their names. We recognize them when they're on screen, but they're characters who have not contributed a lot to the like overarching narrative of Legend of the Galactic Heroes. And again, it's very striking that Yang is only taking those three. Anyways, you know, we have a conversation between Yang and Julian. You know, Julian still wishes he could have gone. You know, kind of asking like Yang, why how come I'm not coming? Like, you know, do you think I'm not good enough? And you know, Yang is like, you know, just like he's just telling Julian, look, kid, like I need you to stay here. Like, you know, like
count on you to be here when I'm not.
Yeah, like we can't both be in the same place. Like, you know, you are your own man, and like don't underestimate how important you are to this war effort. Like, you know, in many ways, you know, I mean, Yang being, you know, very conveniently prophetic here is like, we'll need you someday in the future, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, we have a good bit here where he's teasing Julian a bit of like, okay, be real with me. Like, who do you like more, like Kazunu's daughter or Shenkopp's daughter? Because like, depending on which one you pick, that's going to severely affect my relationship with those two as well. So,
yeah, yes,
which is pretty good. But
as you do,
yeah. So you know, Yang and Julian kind of leave on that note. We kind of return to
Reinhard. Reinhard gets a message from Oberstein that basically says, why don't you just shoot Yang Wenli over peace talks? It'll be really easy.
Once again,
lure him in by sending a messenger, and then you know, just shoot him and use as a casus belli to finally wipe out everyone as part of Yang's camp.
Yes, they basically Oberstein suggested, why don't we just send like someone other than you as a representative? Then once they shoot Yang, like, we can just claim that they have taken that general as hostage, and then we can just blow them up. And it's like, Oberstein is...
Yep, and Oberstein is literally... He even says, like, if nobody wants to do it, I'll do it.
Right, like, Oberstein is once again doing the things that we said in the last podcast are, like, the things you really should not do. Because, like... you do not want to poison the wells like this when it comes to negotiation, you know, and you know, I suppose
he has a point that, like, who else would there be left to negotiate with after that?
Right. Yes. I mean, the thing that, you know, in Oberstein's favor is, like, the reason why you don't, like, double cross people during negotiation is because ostensibly you and the person you are negotiating with are not the only factions left in the world. The idea being that if you double cross, you know, if you're faction A, you double cross faction B, faction C through F still exist to, like,
and we'll be like, whoa, I'm not going to hang out with that guy anymore.
But if only A and B exist, like, I do get where Oberstein is coming from. I just think that, once again, like, this sets an extremely poor precedent. And, like, I am glad that, like, Reinhard and his admirals recognize this. I do like, however, that Mittermeyer and Reuenthal do briefly consider letting Oberstein go ahead with this plan, if just because it would take care of both Yang Wenli and Oberstein, which would, you know, in one fell swoop, get rid of the Empire's two greatest thorns, which, you know, Is
Yup. And
pretty funny.
so
But
Yang aboards the Aletta 2, the
yes,
cruiser, to head out, and a bunch of the Alpha Seal politicians go as
the
well because
what looks like basically the entirety of Alpha Seal's like civilian leadership decides to attend. Like
main
we have a conversation here.
right
Sorry,
for
Iro.
the chain of command, right? Like
Right, like
for official purposes, even though
yes,
Yang Wenli is, the main person, he is technically the military commander of the Alpha Seal Revolutionary
yes.
Group
I
or
mean, the
whatever.
point is that this is a very young move. Yeah, it's a very young move to make sure to because he does not want to set a precedent. He does not because for tragically because of just the events in his life, for better or worse, Yang has legitimate reasons to be afraid of setting a precedent that instills fear in the civilian government.
Right.
You know, he does not want people to actually like start to believe that he might one day like wrest control from the civilian government. So once again, much to his detriment, he defers to the civilian government. He lets them come
Yeah.
along, you know,
And
and
they mention that he's even like already guilty of accepting peace talks without consulting them because
yes,
that's already overstepping his authority.
yes, and that to make a good show of faith, he is explicitly bringing minimal to no security staff with him on this ship. You
Mm-hmm.
know, that Yang wants to make sure it is communicated to both the civilian government and to Reinhard as well that he is approaching them with open arms. This is why he is leaving in the Letta 2 instead of a larger like battleship. This is the
Yeah.
reason why he is bringing a minimal crew. Again, like based on what we see in this episode, literally the only FPA staff, the only actual military staff on this ship is Yang Wenli and the 3 adjutants he brings with him. No security staff, no Rosenritter,
Right.
like I mean, other than Bloomhart, like no power armor, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Purely like sidearms and like civilian like uniform like
Mm-hmm.
dress code here. And like it's at this part of the episode that I think that Iro and I began to get a little bit nervous uh that they would make such a large emphasis on how
How
unarmed
unarmed.
and
Yeah.
how unescorted that Yang Wenli is going. Like Yang Wenli is literally not even taking like any military escort with him. He is going by his ship by himself.
Yep.
And
He stops off Frederica's like medical room.
where she's like weirdly quarantined for some reason, like
Oh, if you're contagious in a closed space
I guess, yeah.
capsule,
It's
I don't
just
know.
it just seemed a bit much for what seemed to be at worst like a fever or something, but
Right. It was the 80s.
yes, but I do like we have a really
Says,
a really lovely
says
heartwarming
Frederica,
conversation here.
Frederica, I'm going to go meet the most handsome man in the universe. So she moves some of the hair. She like fixes his hair. So it's like, you need to fix your hair. You're going to go meet the second most handsome man in the universe.
It's very good. It's very good. And then the narrator starts saying some real fucking ratchet shit, and we
How much would
realize,
Julian agonize over this partying in later days?
thanks, narrator. Like the first of many times in this 3 episodes where the narrator says some shit that is just. Maybe I didn't need to know that. Maybe you didn't need to say that, narrator. Like.
Yeah.
So Yang departs, and a
And he's
little bit of
alone
time
gets
passes.
a message.
Yes.
He's alone gets a message from Boris Konev. Haven't seen him in a while. The Undutiness. They've been investigating Fazan for the past long time. And they've discovered the assassination plot by the Earth Call and Andrew Fork.
Yes. Boris Konev tells them Andrew Fork is on the loose, and he plans to take Yang's life. This sends the Iserlohn crew into gear. They try to send out 6 battleships to rush after Yang to warn him. We are told that they are unable to contact the Letta 2. That some jamming technology has been employed or something. We cut over to the Letta 2, where Yang is playing a literal 3-dimensional chess with his adjutants.
Beating all of them.
Yes, he has beat all of them, and with that, Yang decides to call it a night. he decides to take some sleeping pills. For the first time we have seen on screen, Yang takes some sleeping pills before
Yeah.
settling down with a nice book.
Been a long, The Magic of Summer by one Yoshiki Tanaka.
Good to know that famous authors have endured through the ages of Legend of Galactic Heroes.
I mean, it's a vintage product there.
Yes, but after taking those sleeping pills, again, after he has taken the sleeping pills and is ready to settle in for the night, he receives a message that they have
that Andrew Fork is coming to get him.
Yes, specifically, however, this is where things begin to go kind of haywire. Is that they have received an Empire what appears to be an Empire coded transmission that Andrew Fork plans to assassinate Yang Wenli. So we see it happen. We have this armed merchant ship with Fork, and the Empire ships come, kind of trailing from behind, behind Fork, and they blast Fork.
Yep.
Yes, and this is the part where we begin to realize, oh no, this was all part of the plan. We keep getting multiple scenes that specifically explicitly show us that Yang is not operating at peak mental capacity. He is tired. He is distracted. He is half drugged, but from the sleeping pills, he is not in his right mind, and as a result, he is getting sloppy here. The Empire ships say, "Hey, it's a good thing we caught up in time and totally killed that crazy Andrew Fork. Great timing, huh? So, can we board your ship?" And Yang Wenli is like, "Yeah, sure, whatever. Like, I want to go back to sleep."
Yeah.
And
please meet with the representative council leader.
Yes.
I'm gonna go back to my room or whatever. Go back to my lounge.
And in case you hadn't figured it out already, Andrew Bate was always the bait. He was always meant to be the
fall guy.
The fall guy, and these Empire guys are actually Earth Cult members in disguise. They board the ship and murder the entire Alpha Seal civilian government. Just blast these dudes. I got to give a little bit of credit to Romsky here, where he's just like, don't point that gun at me. That's not how negotiations work. Before they just fucking blast him in the head. It's
Romsky.
Romsky was he wasn't really the smartest guy in the world, but he seemed like someone who
seemed like he broadly had his heart in the right place.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think he truly believed in the cause, for better or worse. But so the Earth Cult guys began fighting their way through the ship. Again, because there are only 3 adjutants here. They try to, when they get to a shootout with the Earth Cult, Soul and Bloomheart try to buy time, to get Yang to safety.
Even a single Rosenritter is not really enough to fight off this many dudes.
I mean, again, this is Bloomheart's not in his armor, and he only has his pistol. I think that look, I'm not saying that if he was in armor, he could have single-handedly fucking killed these Earth Cult guys, but I think he could have done a lot better. I think the point is that these guys are I mean, again, these guys are literally in their uniforms with their sidearms. No weapons, no Zephyr particle, counter defensive. Nothing. This ship doesn't even have automated turrets or lockdown controls. You literally cannot even lock the doors on this ship or something. It's almost insulting how poorly how poor this ship is built for defenses. But
Hatrachev sacrifices himself to Yang and through a hallway and gets shot the hell up.
Yes. Also, Soul and Bloomheart also are mortally wounded during this shootout.
Yes.
They barely managed to get the door closed and Yang out of that room just in time. But the Earth Cult are in hot pursuit, and again, we are repeatedly shown shots of Yang barely even cognitive of what's going on. Those sleeping pills are some strong shit. They're kicking in, and he's barely even conscious at this point.
Yeah, and but the Schenkopp ship gets in with the Rosenritter, Maschenko and Julian, and all of them.
Yes, they do a forcible boarding of the Letta 2.
Yes.
We get a great scene where Schenkopp literally kicks a dude's teeth in with his fucking power armored boot.
Yes.
You know, they're trying to find out where Yang is on the ship. You know, unfortunately they're dealing with the Earth cult. You know, and no luck interrogating them. So the Rose and Ritter are kind of just forced to, you know, fight their way through
murder their way through this crowd.
Yes, in a desperate attempt to find Yang Wenli.
Yep, Yang Wenli, who's just walking down some hallway, thinking to himself, well, I don't know where I'm supposed to go.
Yeah,
I guess
Yang
it's good I didn't bring
Wenli,
Frederica.
yeah, like Yang Wenli is like totally lost. Like he's like his brain is like, you can tell that like he's just not operating at his usual speed. Like, you know, you hear Julian starts shouting Yang's name. He starts saying, you know, Yang, it's me, Julian, I'm here on the ship. Yang can't quite tell if he's hearing things or if he thinks Julian's actually there. So like it's just, you know,
Right.
it's really, you know, we were just kind of on the edge of our seats here. Like I think at this point we could kind of tell where things were going, but like it was like watching a car crash in slow motion.
Yep, and some Earth cult, some nameless, faceless Earth cult goon.
Yeah, so Yang rounds a corner and into another hallway, and as you said, Iro.
Some nameless goon sees him, takes a shot, gets him right through the thigh.
Yeah,
and
gets him right in the femoral artery. You know,
and the dude just runs off.
Yes. Doesn't even decide to like make sure he finished the job. Like somehow both parties in this shooting kind of knew what exactly had happened there. So
yep.
Despite being just a leg shot, or quote unquote just a leg shot, you know, again hits the femoral artery. Yang begins bleeding out immediately. You know, he tries to tourniquet the wound, but like, you know, the bleeding just will not stop. You know, the writing is kind of on the wall here. Yang's just like dragging himself through this dark hallway all by himself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's just thinking his head.
Says Miracle Yang became Bloody Yang. This is a lot of blood, but it's not. It's incomparable to the amount of blood I've shed personally.
Yes, even in his final moments, Yang finds enough time to make some wry comments about the situation. He apologizes to Julian and Frederica that he would not be able to return to them, and kind of Yang collapses, and just as Julian and just a mere minutes later, I think Julian rounds the corner and finds Yang, but
we end the episode on Yang's.
It is all
against the wall,
yes,
and
it is too late.
Narrator says that Yang Wenli died.
Yes, as I said, it's too late. And
episode 83 starts with
what the fuck are you doing? What the fuck are you doing? Are you really just gonna move past this? This is where I put the historical tangent, man.
Oh shit.
Oh my god, you are
historical tangent me.
No, now you've like ruined the pacing of this. What?
No.
I was like slowly building up to this by like I had this whole speech ready for the end of episode 82, and like you've ruined it. You've ruined it. Christ.
Rewind the clock.
And so Julian arrives too late to save Yang Wenli. And yeah, so that's how it happens, you know. I think we all knew that like Yang Wenli was not going to survive this show. I think we didn't have any illusions about that. But hell, I don't think any of us even I think most of us knew he wasn't even going to survive season 3, but I don't think any of us quite. In many ways, this ending is quite fitting, but also I don't think any of us quite expected that this is the way it would go.
One might say it was surprising yet inevitable.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You know, like, you know, it's funny, right? Like, in any other show, I think that in any other show, the events of this episode would feel contrived. Like, oh, Yang goes without security. Yang goes in a small ship. Yang goes without bodyguards. Yang takes the sleeping pill. All of this stuff. Like, I think in any other show, I think a lot of this would have felt contrived. But I think that, as always, despite how much this episode frustrates me, how much it saddens me, as always, this show does a magnificent job of tying these events together in a way that, as you said, Iro, it felt inevitable. The events that happened, they could only happen in this order. It could only go in this direction because of how well it has all been set up.
Right. I think because of the type of show Legend of Galactic Heroes is, where that has a very heavy emphasis on history and has asides like the narrator saying historians would argue over like the true meaning of this moment, etc., etc. It creates the vibe that this was the only way things could have gone, even if like all of these circumstances lined up in this incredibly specific manner that allowed it to happen. Like, that's just the way things be sometimes.
Yes, yeah, totally. And I think that is why, like, we constantly say Legend of Galactic Heroes, like, it speaks from such a familiarity with like human history, and like, just the way history just turns out sometimes, is like, it is not always this logical progression of events. It is like, in many ways, like, in a galaxy as large as Legend of the Galactic Heroes, the idea like somehow Andrew Fork was able to intercept Yang just as like the series of events that had to happen to allow this, right? Like, the Earth Cult had to know how the battle was going. The Earth Cult had to know that eventually a ceasefire would happen. They had to send out Andrew Fork and their assassins, like, just in time to catch Yang Wenli, like, on his way to the peace talks, but not before he had reached Reinhard. Like, there are so many reasons why this assassination should have failed, ranging from just
Mueller had to arrive at the Battle of Vermilion at that one point in time to prevent Yang from killing Reinhard right then.
Right. Like, it's just like, these events, like, they feel like they are so unbelievable. Like, how the hell could things line up that well? And like, the thing you learn from history is that, like, they usually don't. But then when they do, the rare times that they do, those are the moments that kind of reverberate through history. Like, it's the more you learn about like the history of like notable assassinations in human history, the more you realize that, like, actually, like, 90% of assassinations fail for like similar reasons. Just like poor coordination, poor communication, the security forces like doing their actual jobs, like the assassins themselves getting cold feet. Like, there are a variety of reasons why normally assassinations fail more often than they succeed. But the few times they do succeed, it's just all the events kind of come together in a way that, like, it sounds like a story. And I think that is what makes history such a deeply compelling subject to study. The reason I bring this all up is because, in many ways, like, Yang's assassination, his tragic demise here in episode 82, reminds me in some ways of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. For those of you unfamiliar, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand is the event that essentially kicks off World War One.
Right. That's about the extent that I recall from public schooling.
Yes,
someone killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and then this country had to go to war because they were allied with this country, and then this other country had to go to war because they were allied with this country, and this like other dude way over here had to go because they were allied with one of those other ones that was allied with another one, and World War One happened.
Yes, essentially, I'm not here to give a World War One lesson, so I could go into more depth, but Iro has basically given a decent enough basic summation of the events that kick off as a result of this assassination. But the assassination itself is in some ways almost a comical event in the way it was carried out. But I mean, despite it being comical, it still led to like the deaths of millions. But the events themselves are almost absurd in the way they happened. So the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was planned and carried out by a Serbian nationalist group known as the Black Hand. Um, Long story short, Serbia or the Serbians were a part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, a kind of confederation of multiple smaller Baltic states that kind of was largely ruled by the Austrians, I suppose. And they wanted to declare independence and eventually join with the then nascent nation of Yugoslavia. The assassination was planned to be carried out on a day when Archduke Franz Ferdinand was doing a public appearance, and the thing that like royals do: drive through the streets, wave at the people, meet with the mayor, blah blah blah. The original plan was that along the route that Archduke Franz Ferdinand was going to traverse, there was going to be 3 assassins on that route, each armed with bombs intended to, basically blow up the car, The first 2 assassins basically chickened out at the last second. They saw the car coming. They could not bring themselves to commit the act. They chickened out. Human nature, huh?
Sure.
The third assassin,
just killing a man.
Yes, but it very much speaks to like the very real, like the very like grounded reality of human nature is that training people to do these things is actually quite difficult. The third guy, however, did throw his bomb. Unfortunately, the bomb bounced off the folded back of the convertible of the car back onto the street, and the timing of it was off. So it bounced away down the road and then blew up, still disabling the car and injuring a dozen people, but not killing the Duke himself.
Mm-hmm.
Again, just... Okay.
Dodged a bullet there, man.
Yes. Just kind of a comedy of errors kind of happening here. The assassin, realizing his plot had failed, attempted to swallow a cyanide pill and threw himself into a nearby river in an attempt to drown himself. However, the cyanide pill was past the expiration date and just induced a violent vomiting, and the river was less than a foot deep because it was the summer during the dry season. So he was quickly apprehended. After this event, the Duke decided to take a sudden turn in their original itinerary to visit the wounded from the bombing instead of their originally planned route. He decided to basically take a sudden turn at the road, but due to a miscommunication error, others drivers took the exact opposite turn, leaving Archduke's car largely unprotected. At the same time, Galvario Princip, the man who would eventually succeed in assassinating the Duke, was making his own plans, unaware that the Archduke himself had made new plans. He made a plan assuming that, based on the Archduke's original plan, he would eventually go down this road, the road he was on his return trip. And so he decided to stalk out the area by a sandwich shop. At the same time, the Archduke's car made its way down this very same road, passing this very same sandwich shop, when the driver realized that they had gone the wrong way and that they would need to stop the car and make a U-turn. At this very moment, he stopped the car basically 10 feet away from Princip, who realized who had just driven right up to him on the sidewalk. He walked up to the car, blasted the Duke at point blank, and succeeded in kicking off one of the greatest human conflicts in history.
Well then, man. So yeah, just total coincidence
Yes,
of
I mean, you know,
this.
yes, yes. It's a slightly sensationalized version of the events, but because at the end of the day, these people were still here with the plan to kill the Duke. But
Right,
just the way it actually happened is so like the events that play out are just so like they're so fucking janky. You're like,
right.
this
Play
can't
the
be
acting
right.
sacks.
Right, like this can't be right. This can't be how one of the most violent conflicts in human history actually happened. And it's like, well, well, dear reader, that's exactly how it happened.
And as we fade out to the credits, we say, "Truth is stranger than fiction."
Yes, and so like, in many ways, like Yang's assassination was a far more competent affair, but like, it just reminds me of like
Like their plan worked.
right, but their
Just
plan worked only because of the variety of like mistakes that Yang and the FPA made. Like if Yang had literally just I don't know brought like more bodyguards, or had brought a larger ship, or had not taken those sleeping pills and like had not been half drugged, like
right,
who knows how this plan could have gone, right? Like this plan had so many points of failure, and it worked because I hate to admit it, but like because Yang basically fell asleep at the wheel, and it's tragic, Like I don't think any of us ever thought that like oh Yang would go out swinging, We didn't think oh Yang's gonna like fucking pull a Bucock and like do a suicidal charge on Reinhard, but we did not think that like Yang was gonna go down like fucking double fisting pistols on top of like a body like a pile of like Empire corpses, but like
right.
we all thought it would be a I don't know,
More
like
dignified than this.
more dignified than this, like dying half drugged, alone in the dark in a hallway, like
Right, just bleeding out.
bleeding out. Like it truly is tragic, and it is with those events that we are then forced to contend with the events of episode 83 now.
Indeed, where we just immediately start with Julian finding the corpse of young Wenli and not having a good time.
Julian does not take it well.
Knees shaken,
Yeah,
falls to his knees.
he sees some more Earth Cult guys kind of round the corner, and
Goes to town.
Julian pulls a Schenkopp here and just kind of murders the shit out of them. Just obliterates them, brutalizes their corpses. It takes one Louis Mashengo to kind of swoop in and restrain Julian. Kind of tell him, get it together, man. Like who's gonna carry Yang's corpse back to Iserlohn if not you? Like
Right. I don't know if I've ever appreciated Mashengo's like totally level-headedness like as much as in this moment.
yeah, like bless Mashengo. Like that, like of course he's got to be hurting about this too. Everybody in this episode, like the big theme of this episode is just how much this death hurts everybody. Like not just on the typical level of like, oh, who will lead us now? Who will come up with our like genius plans? It hurts on the level of like how much Yang meant to these people. And like, like I ain't gonna lie, like when Yang died in the last episode, I think Iro and I were both just kind of
Just like, yep, we kind of thought this might happen.
right. Like we were kind of like stunned, right? We were like stunned but resigned. We were like, wow, I can't believe this happened. But I think it is this episode in which like
Oh yeah,
seeing everybody react to Yang's death is I think what made episode 83 single-handedly like I've had a week away from this episode to kind of think about this, and I think I can still confidently say 83 is one of the hardest like episodes of fiction I've ever had to watch, like on an emotional level. Like it's like even just thinking about it now, like, you know, there are things like there is a lump rising in my throat just thinking about like the way people react to it. Like Julian here, just like, you know, going through the stages of grief, you know, like anger and denial and bargaining, like just he cannot bring himself to
Right?
believe this has
Like
happened.
shouting that like isn't it my fault
Right,
because
blaming
we investigated?
himself. Yeah, yeah. You know, like fucking. We cut to Schenkopp. They've cleared out the Earth cult.
Yep.
We find
Captured a
Bloomheart.
few of them.
Yeah, we captured a few of them somehow. They find Bloomheart is actually still alive. He's barely hanging in there. He asks if Yang's okay. Schenkopp doesn't know the news yet, so he's like, "Don't worry, I got Julian on the job. Like, fucking Yang will be fine, you know."
Mm-hmm.
And Bloomheart kind of passes with a smile on his face, like, knowing that he died. He died saving Yang, or so he thinks. And Julian kind of walks into the room carrying Yang's body, and Schenkopp being Schenkopp, like, you know, this is like, it's like the most cliche thing, right? Like, but it's so well done.
Playing around, guys.
Right, like Schenkopp, because but the thing is, it's cliche, but also like, you know, that's what Schenkopp would do, because like that would be Schenkopp's way of dealing with grief, where he's like, "This is a real bad play you guys are throwing." I think that's like his line actually is like,
right.
You know, like, you guys aren't cut.
I know I didn't sign up to be in a tragedy.
Right, like I didn't sign up to be in a tragedy or something, and it's like, you know, it's like bless Schenkopp. Honestly, like Schenkopp really steps up to the plate this episode. Just like, you know, this hurts him. Like, you know, this hurts him because like we don't see it as often, and because Schenkopp doesn't show it as often. But like Schenkopp loved Yang as much as as anybody else on that ship. Like he did. Like he respected Yang. Like, you know, he followed Yang to the ends of the earth. You know, he went up against
not a military prison.
Yeah, he blew up an FPA fucking like escort to save young Wenli. You know, like Schenkopp was maybe one of, like, maybe short of Julian, the most loyal person in Yang's camp. And like, but also like, he's a man with like years of experience under his belt, so he's like, all right, like, escort the wounded.
Gotta deal with this.
We gotta deal with this. Like, we're returning to Iserlohn. Preserve Yang's body. You know, we find out that Sol has barely survived. Well,
right. So he's severely injured, but still alive.
Severely injured, but still alive.
The narrator notes that while they took the bodies of Yang and Patrushev and Bloomheart, they did not take the bodies of the Alpha Seal politicians.
Right, which would invite later criticism. Which is like
incredible Galactic Heroes statement to make.
Yes, a very Galactic Heroes statement to make. I appreciate it. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, I like that statement because it's like a tiny microcosm of, like, on one hand, like, of course, like, this would be the equivalent of, like, you know, I don't know, if like, if in the Lincoln assassination, right, like I don't know, like, if more people than Lincoln had been hurt, like they escorted Lincoln, but they forgot to bring the other people with them. Like, it's actually a hugely unprofessional move on their part, but also kind of speaks to like how grave of the situation, like how much Yang's death dominates their mindset, that like, in all likelihood, they did not leave the Alpha Seal politicians' bodies there on purpose. It's probably just it
was not what they were thinking about.
Right, they literally forgot because like such a much more big event had happened. But yeah, so Schenkopp is like doing his best to keep the Rosenritter in check.
Right,
like the Rosenritter guys are like,
hand us the prisoners. They're Earthcult people. They're not gonna tell us anything anyway. Let's just beat the shit out of them.
Yes. Like, and Schenkopp, like, well, they say specifically, we should throw these guys into our fucking like nuclear reactor or our fission reactor. And Schenkopp's way of calming them down is, calm down. We still got to interrogate them. Also, we have an even bigger fission reactor back at Iserlohn, so like,
so get back in line.
So hold up a bit. But like, you can tell that like Schenkopp, if Schenkopp were like left to his own devices, he would also fucking beat these people to death with his bare hands, and he's just barely keeping it together. We have a really good, maybe one of my favorite conversations, like in these 3 episodes between Julian and Schenkopp. You know, Julian is still like blaming himself. He's still like, what do we do? We're done here. Like, this is it for the FPA. And Schenkopp is the one who's like, he's keeping it together. He's like, no, like, when we get back, we are going to need to elect a new leader. We are going to need to send a message to Reinhard to explain why we're not at the peace talks. We're going to need to reorganize our leadership, like, all this stuff. And it's like, you can tell he's hurting, but also like, like Julian has grown up a lot. He has, but like,
Still kid.
Yeah, like this is a little bit reductive, but like Julian and Schenkopp's reaction to Yang's death is the difference between a boy and a man. Like, in terms of their life experiences, like, like Schenkopp is hurting just as much, but he is like focused.
He's able to like think of, all right, what are the things that need to be done now?
Right, or if nothing else, he is using this as a crutch to help him get through this. Is just focusing on what needs to be taken care of. And Schenkopp finally brings up the biggest thing of all, which is, well, who's going to tell Frederica? Because she doesn't know yet. They get back to Iserlohn. In case you thought this episode was done with like fucking seeing very tragic reactions to Yang's death, now it's Kazunu's turn.
Yep, he's also not having a good time, like he's so much younger than me, and it's total natural order of things all off if he goes before I do.
Right, like I like the line he says specifically where it's, if things had gone according to plan, Yang was supposed to have died like 15 years ago. Like, like basically that is that we've gotten away with going against the script this long. Why did it have to happen now? And
yeah,
it's so hard, like seeing everybody react to this. That eventually the men, of course, come to the reaction that well, Miss Kazalnu should be the one to tell Miss Frederica, because women are good at that stuff. And Miss Kazalnu, bless her, is like, no, like I'm not doing this. Like Julian,
you're part of their family.
Like you are essentially, whether they ever admitted it or not, you are basically their adopted son. Like it has to be you. You're the adopted son who had a crush on your surrogate mother. It's weird. Anyways, so Julian kind of goes in. Frederica's by herself.
Yep, and she's smart enough to realize, like, there's only one thing that would warrant this kind of reaction from Julian.
Right, like
to walk in and have trouble telling her something.
Yeah, she on some level she doesn't want to believe it, but seeing the look on Julian's face, she knows in her heart that Yang is already gone. And man,
the line here where she says, like, I wish you were a liar because then I wouldn't have to believe what you were saying.
Yeah, but like, Julian, you're too honest. So if you of all people is going to tell me that Yang Wenli has died, like, this is like one of the hardest conversations I've ever had to watch in a piece of fiction. Frederica goes on to a little tangent here about Yang. Yang should have died old and forgotten. Yang should have died well into his 80s, like living in some like quaint little house that like he could barely afford with his military pension, like forgotten by history, forgotten by like the leadership of the FPA. Like Yang should have died a footnote in the FPA history books. Right. He should have died like maybe
didn't want to have to do all of these things.
Right,
that he had to do.
Like Yang should have been like the kind of guy who gets like listed like 3 or 4 times in one chapter of a history book, but that's it. You know,
like, he was the greatest general of his time, but it was a time of peace, so his skills were never really needed.
Right, like the number of people who should have remembered Yang's name shouldn't have numbered more than his family and maybe a couple of his subordinates. Like Yang should have never lived in an era where he would go down in history as like not just one of the greatest military leaders of his era, but one of the greatest military leaders in human history. Like that is now the memory of Yang Wenli. People will eventually forget about Yang Wenli the man. Like people will forget about Yang Wenli the alcoholic. Yang Wenli. People will forget about Yang Wenli the jokester and the trickster and the source of disease. Like there's this idea that like even now, even in this very moment, they're talking about historiography in the very human sense of like because of Yang's military achievements and now because of the way he died, Yang will only ever be remembered for his military achievements. He will go down in history purely an admiral and nothing more. He will not be remembered as a human. People are not going to write history books about Yang Wenli, the man. They're going to write about Yang Wenli, the admiral, the tactician.
Mm-hmm.
The tactician, the magician that was tragically cut down in his youth. That will be the narrative now. That is the narrative that will dominate Yang Wenli's legacy for the rest of history. And like it gets into a little bit of like, Fork died because he wanted to be remembered by history. But like when you really get down to it, who the fuck wants to be remembered by history if it means like dying young and being mourned by all the people you love in your life? Like, is it not better to be forgotten? Is it not better to be forgotten, but to have died like comfortably? Like surrounded by the ones you love. And God, this is just such a hard conversation to watch. They even have like a fucking like internal
fantasy spot of
like,
old man
Yang, like a ball bouncing towards him. He's sitting in a rocking chair with a blanket over his lap. Like his granddaughter would be playing with a bouncy ball that would like bounce towards him, and he would go to grab it, but like, or he would have already passed in his sleep in the middle of a book, and like we will never see that Yang Wenli. And like isn't that the tragedy? Isn't that the actual tragedy of war? That like I feel like this whole show, Legend of the Galactic Hero, this entire OVA has repeatedly communicated to us the tragedy of warfare, the human cost of conflict, and like we have seen that in the form of like the lives it has taken. But I think it is in this singular moment with the passing of Yang Wenli that we are very harshly reminded that like as much I think we all had our fun watching Yang Wenli just dunk on Imperial admirals time and time again. But like,
yes,
these
many people were dying.
Right, these were killing fields. Like people were dying by the thousands, by the millions, and Yang Wenli did not deserve this. He did not deserve to die like this. Like, and the sad thing is, maybe Yang Wenli would disagree. Maybe Yang would say, "Actually, no. Considering the number of lives I've taken, this is probably the ending I deserve." And it's.
I mean, as the show itself has said, like part of what made Yang Wenli as an admirable person as he was is that he did consider the costs in such a way.
He never forgot. And yeah, so anyways, Frederica asks Julian to leave her alone for a bit. She's God bless Frederica. She's trying to put up such a strong front, but like it's so hard to watch here. They kind of go to we kind of return to a talk between Julian, Schenkopp, and Kazelnu.
Yeah, Dusty's there too.
Oh, Dusty. My bad. Dusty's there too. Actually, we'll get into Dusty later in this podcast. Really got props to Dusty in general. This next couple of episodes.
They talk about how humans don't fight for their principles; they fight for the people who embody their principles.
Yeah, basically, they kind of echo what was kind of one of Yang's last, galaxy brain monologues, which is that
like even though everyone will continue to fight like in the spirit of Yang Wenli, they need a person to act as galvanizing element.
Like that for better or worse. Like it's something Yang Wenli kind of lands. He really nails a few episodes prior. Most of the people even here in the FPA fleet are not fighting for democracy. They're not. Like, especially in a world where like Reinhard's empire is like as well run as it is. Like, people here aren't fighting for a liberal democracy. They're not fighting for freedom. And they're fighting for the freedom that Yang Wenli embodies. And, they correctly guess that, like, no matter who they pick to kind of be the next leader of the FPA, a lot of people are going to start deserting, they're going to lose a lot of manpower. Kazelnu says that's probably for the best. We shouldn't try to stop them. Like, we don't want half-hearted people here on Iserlohn. Like, make sure that all the like fair weather fans of a liberal democracy, leave now before like their like half-hearted like beliefs like infect the rest of the crew.
Yeah.
even if we lose like half our manpower, we need only the people who are like most devoted to the cause. They decide that it can't be Kazanu or Schenkopp who becomes the new military leader of the FPA. It must be Julian.
Yeah. And they decide that Frederica has to be the new political leader.
Yes, she must become the new civilian leader of the Alpha Seal independent government.
There's some talk about how it's potentially shady that the like quote unquote line of succession is here between Yang Wenli and Yang Wenli's closest family.
Right. And like
but that because Yang Wenli never officially took power, this is technically not a succession via like family lines,
right?
whatnot.
Like, and Kazanu kind of shown off a lot of political savvy here, where he's like, "Look, you're right. Like, maybe this is a little shady. I know people are going to complain, but also like, realistically, we can only invoke the ghost of Yang for so long. Like right now, in this moment, the ghost of Yang Wenli is almost as powerful as the man himself. Almost. And we need to take advantage of that. Because the longer we wait and the more distant of a memory Yang becomes, the less relevant, like the less we can leverage that to our aims. Like
they can only instill Julian as military commander right now because everybody knows that he was Yang Wenli's adopted son and studied, military tactics under him.
Like the longer you wait and the longer that Yang becomes a concept, the more and more Yang moves into concept rather than person, like the harder it will be to convince people of these like very like necessary but radical changes to the leadership. And so, Julian it refuses. He does not want to. He fears he could never live up to Yang. And he thinks that it is unfair to foist this onto Frederica as well. And, like, I would agree. I think we could all agree that, like, on some level, it is deeply unfair to force Frederica to step up to this plate in such a trying time. But, like, again, like, Kazanu, in some ways, Kazanu is channeling a little bit of, like, what would Oberstein be like if Oberstein was a good person? Like Kazanu knows these are bad things to do, but he also knows that these are necessary things to do if we want to ensure the survival of our independence movement. And so
Frederica, agrees to take that position.
Yeah, she, I can actually kind of accept this. I can accept this bit here. Like she says she's going to accept it. Julian's like, why? And like, she's like. And he's like, but like, what about me? I can never live up to like Yang. And Frederica says like, that's not the point. Like, it's true. You'll never live up to Yang Wenli. Like, because
there was only one Yang Wenli, and there's only one Julian Mincy.
Yeah, like there are things that you will do that Yang could never achieve. Like, because we are individuals, and if you try to chain yourself to the expectation that you must be the next Yang Wenli, it will consume you, and that you need to lead the way that only you can. We must, I don't know if Yang's claim is true, to be honest. I feel like we've seen too many examples of this going the other way, but Frederica says that we must live up to Yang's claim that history cannot be changed by petty terrorism. I don't know. Have you looked at the last 20 years of American history? I'd say that we have done a pretty poor job.
This was written.
We have done a pretty poor job of not allowing ourselves to be swayed by petty terrorism, but that's another conversation to be had.
Later this podcast, potentially.
Yes. A different type of petty terrorism, I suppose.
Yeah.
But Julian accepts. He his appointment is announced to Iserlohn. It causes some unrest among the ranks. They're like, why?
People are like, Dusty, why should we listen to him? There's other more qualified people.
Right, like you're older, like you're an admiral, you've like fought with Yang Wenli, like this Julian kid hasn't even led a fleet before, and bless Dusty.
Get the Dusty special of so what?
Yes, Dusty's just like, and do you have a problem? Like, bless Dusty, Dusty really steps up to the plate in these next couple of episodes. Just like, Anyways, we'll get into that when we get to Poplin in the next part. But we have one
Murai,
meeting with Murai, and
the square of the whole of the fleet.
Murai, in his not final moments, but what could be narratively his final moments, he once again does the thing that only Murai could do. He takes one for the team in a way that only, is he an admiral? What is his rank?
He's a vice admiral.
Yes. Okay, vice admiral. He takes one for the team in only a way specifically Vice Admiral Murai could.
Yes. He basically tells Julian that he is gonna leave and is gonna provide a basically provide an excuse for everyone else who doesn't actually want to stay to also leave.
Right. Murai, once again, master of his command of human behavior, knows that if nobody important leaves, there are going to be some fair, not every fair weather dissident is going to leave. There are going to be some people who stay because of peer pressure, and
right.
those people are going to spread that dissidence through the rest of the crew. But if Murai leaves, everybody can point to Murai and be like, see, even someone as important as Murai is leaving. I'm out of here.
Right. Only the true believers will stay.
Right. Despite the fact that you could tell Murai wants to stay. You could tell Murai wants to advise Julian. You can tell that Julian in some ways needs Murai, but in many ways, this is just as necessary of a task, and only Murai could pull this off. And
yep. Only as big of a square as Murai could do it.
So Murai leaves. And
yep. And if with him leaving, lots of soldiers also leave, as well as the remaining Alpha Seal politicians.
Yes,
decide to basically say, we're not gonna claim independence anymore. We'll just go with the Empire.
Right. The Alpha Seal government decides to, dissolve the Alpha Seal government, which is a little weird because that means that now Iserlohn are the only remnants of the Alpha Seal government, and that I guess that Frederica is essentially the new leader of a non-existent political entity, which is
right.
It's one of those things where it's a formality. That they have to maintain the illusion of a cohesive government, but also with the end of this episode, that government essentially does not exist anymore. But it's just and kind of with that, we kind of end episode 83.
Indeed.
Murai was a true patriot. He was a true patriot. History will not the sacrifice he made for his nation will not be recorded in the history books.
Yes, he'll go down in history as a traitor, and but
only those who know of this will ever know the sacrifice he made to his nation. How the fuck did Murai somehow ended up being the fucking the boss of the Legend of the Galactic Heroes universe?
God damn it!
That's the thing. Julian even says history will call you a traitor for the rest of eternity. Your name will be synonymous with turncoat. People will spit on your name for generations to come. And Murai's that's what it's got to take.
Yeah, but something only I can do.
Yeah, and hey, you know what? If there still exists an FBA in 200 years to spit on my name, then it will have been worth it. And it's man, I wish we had gotten more Murai episodes. I really do. Dude seems like such a fucking cool guy, and it's just such a shame we get so little of him.
Yeah.
But so with that, we got to move into episode 84, where
notable the opening is not played at all during these episodes.
Yes. And so
we open 84 with the piano version of the ending theme for season 3.
So
Poplin's locked in the room.
It's a week has basically passed. We forgot to mention basically a little bit earlier. I think the last episode they mentioned that Poplin doesn't even want to come out and see the body. Right. He has locked himself in his room and has just been drinking this entire time.
Bunch of liquor.
Yes, so they break into Poplin's room.
They have to hack open the door.
Yes, just there, fucking sprawled in a corner, surrounded by what appears to be dozens of empty bottles of hard liquor.
Yeah.
Poplin looking haggard as fuck. Says some shit like, "You better not be ghosts. I'm not in the mood for seeing ghosts."
Right.
Like this better just be an alcoholic hallucination. And
Right. A normal person, I think, would have alcohol poisoning by this point and would probably be dead. But I guess Poplin's just like incredibly comprehensive knowledge of poisons and their lethal dosages meant that even drinking away his sorrows, he knew to the drop where to stop.
yeah, because I mean, I don't want to do the math here, but like generously assuming it's been about a week, and like there's at least like 36 bottles visible in that like.
It's not that many.
Are you sure? I think it was like.
It's not 36.
Like 24? I feel like there's a what? Are you looking at the screen cap right now?
I am.
Okay, fine. Count them for me. Like just
there's like 4 or 5 bottles of whiskey.
No, there's more than that. Like I feel like there's way more than that. Like, do you see how quickly he drinks that bottle in that scene?
Now that's the like holy shit, man.
Dude downs an entire bottle in the span of like 10 seconds. Whatever.
That would kill anyone who does not have
whatever. Yes, add inhuman alcohol tolerance to Poplin's list of talents.
Yeah,
but yeah, so
like I refuse to take orders from anyone other than Yang Wenli.
Yeah, and then here's the thing: again, Dusty rising to the occasion. Dusty, goofy Dusty, the guy who dressed up as a pirate. Dusty, the guy writing his memoirs. Dusty, the guy who invented the blow up the transports strategy. Dusty Attenborough, named Dusty, fucking grabs Poplin by the fucking scruff and is like, Dusty, like it is my like privilege to introduce you to your new superior officer, Julian Minci, who is now supreme commander of the military forces of the FPA. You will obey his orders. You will not disobey. You will not question his authority in front of other like personnel. Right. Like you will not.
Even if he lets you, I won't fucking let you.
Right. Like I will not let you muddy the chain of command here. Like now,
if you're not okay with it, get the fuck out.
Right. Like now more than ever, we must maintain the chain of command. And if you don't like it, you can go with Murai and the others. And like it's like, damn, Dusty. Like, and here's the thing. Like we're talking about like Dusty stepping up, like Dusty like stepping up to the plate. Here's the thing I'm getting to realize. Like, what if Dusty always had it in him, and just like. He just never
the Garrus of Iserlohn.
Right, like he always had it in him, but he just never had to because Yang Wenli was there. You know, right. Like why step up and be like the new hard ass leader when Yang Wenli is always going to like have a handle on things. You know, like of course I could take things easy. Yang Wenli is here, like, but like now that Yang Wenli isn't, you know, I think there's this big worry. I think there's still this big worry that, like, without Yang Wenli, the FPA would essentially just collapse, you know? That, like, none of its individual leaders could step up to the plate and fill in that gap. But the thing we're kind of seeing with episodes 83 and 84 that I really like is actually that, like, without Yang, a lot of these dudes actually are stepping into the spotlight. They are picking up the slack. Like, one of them alone cannot replace Yang Wenli, but all of them working together... They're doing an okay job of it. They're not doing as good of a job as Yang could have, but like they are getting it done. You know, like they are doing what needs to be done. And even Poplin, Poplin's like, he like salutes. He's like, "You're right. Like I'm gonna go wash my face, take a shower. Like you got it, boss. You know, like everybody's pulling it together."
It's interesting how like. The Empire kind of always assumed if we kill Yang Wenli, like they'll all fall apart and we won't have to do anything. Whereas like everyone's kind of like pulling it together now. Yeah. Whereas if Kaiser Reinhard died
or even gets sick, like the entire thing falls apart.
Yes.
And like
like because of like how the chain of command works, I guess, like if Reinhard falls unconscious like he did, who's there to make decisions?
Yeah, no. I mean, like, in many ways, like, this whole dynamic here is a low-key and subtle, like, comparison of autocracy and democracies in action. Like, I think that, like, maybe some viewers maybe miss out on this, but, like, I think that this moment here with Yang's death is actually showing us what is the strength of a liberal democracy. It is showing us that even in its darkest moments, if the president is killed, if the 5-star admiral is killed, like, in a perfect world, ideally, a democracy is built to shore up that wound, because like we have shown up this whole time. Okay, like Yang Wenli does all the high level planning for the FPA, but actually, like, here's the thing: like, we always said, like, oh, it's a shame that Yang Wenli is the only admiral on his side, and that is true. He's the, like, other than Dusty and some of the other guys like Merkatz, like, but Yang is just the admiral. When it comes to like actually executing his plans, he has utilized all these other people up till now. Like, his plans only succeed because of Edwin Fisher's like battle maneuvering. They only succeed because of Kazelnu's logistics. They only succeed because of Schenkopp's Rosenritter like succeeding when they board ships. Like
creates this web where like even if one part falls, like everything else can keep it together,
right? And
keep each other up,
or at least they can maintain the web. Like, obviously,
right.
Losing Fisher was a huge blow. Losing Yang is an even huger blow. But like, this is a web that can recover. Like, it may not be as strong as before, but like, right. If given time, it can.
Whereas Reinhard dies, like, who's next in line of succession?
Right. You don't
even if he had a hypothetical heir, like, say that heir comes into succession, well, everybody here swore fealty to only Kaiser Reinhard, not to Kaiser Reinhard Jr.
Exactly.
Like, why should we listen to that guy?
Like that's the thing. Like, and I mean, and that's a fascinating thing, right? Like, regardless if a hypothetical Reinhard II was even a good ruler or not, look at Reinhard's admirals. You can already begin to see like which admirals like would pull a Merkatz and stay loyal in spite of the issues of the ruler, and which ones would immediately break off if that ruler could not live up to like the legacy of the first Reinhard. Like,
right, which is different than supporting the institution
itself.
Yeah.
And so Poplin pulls it together.
Get some Merkatz.
Yeah, we got a great part here. Merkatz kind of muses to Schneider that he's like, once upon a time, I wonder if it would have been better if I had died during the Lippstadt like rebellion, but now I have no regrets for the choices I've made. Like,
mm-hmm.
I'm an old man, and I lived like these last few years assuming that I would be set in a certain way for the rest of my life. That I'm old. I had finished growing. But here with Yang, kind of seeing the rise of the FPA and the way taught
me another way to live.
Yeah, it's a good moment. It kind of shows that, like, again, Merkatz, still an imperial loyalist to an extremely morally compromised throne, but also someone who is showing that even he can be swayed by like
mm-hmm.
what a good democracy can achieve. And meanwhile, we kind of switch back to
right after we hold the funeral, and we officially announce the death to all space.
Yes, Reinhard gets the news and
does not take it well.
Reinhard does not take it well. He kind of returns back to bratty Reinhard. Like, this is like we get back to like Reinhard doesn't want to go to the party. Reinhard.
Frederica, Hilda, do you have the right to give me bad news this bad?
Right, like Reinhard basically shouts at the heavens, how come all of his friends and foes leave him? Like,
right, they should keep living for my own sake.
Yes.
To give me an enemy to fight.
Yes, Reinhard very much kind of basically...
You don't have the right to die to anyone other than me.
Right, Reinhard is basically putting his whole ass out here. Yes. Full Vegeta, like I said. Reinhard...
Voiced by Vegeta.
Yes, it's perfect. Like I said, Reinhard putting his whole ass out here, just fully admitting to Hilda how petty his actual like motivations are. Like, he doesn't actually care about the Empire. He doesn't care about like ruling. He just wants good enemies, and now the last of those good enemies have left him. And kind of it's this news kind of reverberates through Reinhard's admirals. They all kind of like they all have their own different reactions to it, you know? Like,
right. Some of them are like, young Wenli is not actually dead. It's another trick.
Right. Binfield, bless Binfield. Binfield is currently in the denial stage of the 5 stages of grief. He's like, no, it's just a trick from Yang. Yang wouldn't die. Not after fucking me over that time. No, there's no way Yang could die. And like, you know, Mittermeyer's like, so who?
No reason to do that for like they would gain nothing from doing this.
Right.
Well, he's probably just plotting something that we don't understand.
And Midfield's just like, you know, like Yang's got a galaxy brain. The rest of us are like space brain at best. I'm like P brain here. I can't understand his full plan.
Someone asks, so who the hell Julian Minty
Mittermeyer
is?
does, which I love. Okay. It's like Mittermeyer's just like, wait. Who the hell is Julian Minty?
I love how, but apparently everyone's chair at this long table has a fold-up laptop.
Yes, so they look him up. Thankfully, Valen is not here because
Valen would go.
Valen would have been like, "Wait a minute,
I know that kid.
That's the kid I met at the Earth Cult compound." I almost wish he was there just to fucking see his incredulous reaction. Wait, that was second in command of the FPA. I hope we eventually do see Valen's reaction to Julian being the new leader of the FPA.
It has to happen.
It has to happen. I need to see it happen. Mittermeyer.
They all kind of agree that, like, well, nobody can really take over for Yang Wenli.
Right, and like, whoever this kid is, like, Mittermeyer, once again, being so nice. Mittermeyer, even to his enemies, is so nice. Mittermeyer's like, man, that kid's got a rough road.
Yeah.
That kid's
feel bad for that kid.
Yeah, he's got a rough road ahead of him. I wish him the best, despite being my mortal enemy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
they note that the other fake Imperial cruiser that was Earth Cult, the one that was not sunk by Schenkopp, was sunk by Admiral Bureau.
Yes, so the Empire, essentially we get a little montage here of the Empire trying to crack down on the Earth Cult. You know, like, despite the fact that the assassination of Yang probably benefits them, the Empire recognizes, like, how fucking shitty their internal security is if the Earth Cult was able to pull off something this drastic.
Like, they realize that, because, like, a bunch of junior officers also kill themselves rather than be investigated. And so they're like, well, those Earth Cult assholes are sure pretty high up, aren't they?
Yeah, so basically, despite the ostensible destruction of their home base, the Empire comes to the horrific realization that actually the Earth Cult is far more deeply embedded in their leadership than they initially assumed.
Yes. And we gotta go back to some Mittermeyer and Reuenthal talking about this.
Yes, but they're
drinking beer for once.
Drinking beer instead of wine. But it's a little weird because, like, they're not drinking, like, bottles or cans. They're, like, drinking, like, out of one bottle of beer that they were pouring into glasses.
A big bottle that they're pouring.
A big bottle, but, like, they're drinking, like, halfway between a pint and a shot glass sized glasses of beer.
It's just weird to me that, like, it's just funny to me, I should say, that after drinking nothing but fancy ass wine and spirits this whole time, they just whip out a fucking Suntory brand beer.
Yes, it's very it's
like, hang on a minute.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. It's like you always assume that, like, oh, like, you know, the FPA would be beer people, but, like, the Empire, they seem like wine and champagne types, you know. But
poisoned wine.
I'd say beer, but the FPA seem like like brown hard liquor people in general. Like,
look, can you blame them?
Yeah. Whether it's, you know, whether it's, you know, Job Trunit's super whiskey or just the regular Alpha Seal whiskey they had on Iserlohn. But anyway, so Mittermeyer and Reuenthal are kind of discussing, like, well, what do you think of this?
This is kind of before all this, we were both opposed to invading Iserlohn, but now that we did invade Iserlohn and got this outcome, I'm not really happy about it.
Yes, I do like that. Like, Mittermeyer's like, so we should float this out. Do you think Oberstein was involved? And I think Reuenthal says something like, as much as I wish it were so, not every single cosmic coincidence in this world can be attributed to Oberstein.
Yeah, they talk about apparently Reuenthal's child was born You know, the baby they sent to the penal colony.
Yes, the penal colony baby.
Uh,
Again, Mittermeyer's like, how's the kid? And Reuenthal, being fucking Reuenthal's like, how should I fucking know? I don't care. And it's just like, Reuenthal, please.
Neither should I.
Just every single time.
Well, it's like, all right, Mittermeyer, I know you believe that the sins of the father should not pass on, but also I should have never existed.
I mean, the intrinsic thing here is that Mittermeyer
believes my mismatched eyes.
Right. I mean, again, Mittermeyer is the guy who always believes that the kids are going to be all right, whereas Reuenthal is the guy who just like,
even though I brought him into this world, he'll just grow up to be as hated as I am.
Right. Yes. Just again, also putting his whole ass out there, but eventually they kind of like.
They're like, well, since you're a boss of all former FPA space, Reuenthal, and I'm going to be at home with my wonderful wife on Odin, I guess we won't be able to talk to like this too much anymore.
Mittermeyer repeatedly brings up how happy he is to see his wife again in this episode, which makes me a little bit nervous. I don't think they would kill off another character this major so soon after Yang Wenli, but
whole season of the show to go.
But Mittermeyer keeps bringing up his wife. He also, Mittermeyer being the nice guy, he keeps bringing up that like, well,
we're friends.
No. I was gonna say, if nothing else, like, at least no more soldiers have to die in this battle. You know, like, yet again, Mittermeyer seems to be the only person on the Empire side who is concerned with like the actual human casualties that are occurring in this war.
Indeed. And the narrator, who has no chill, goes on to say that after these two shook hands and parted, how could they have known that it would be the final time that the twin stars of the Empire would shake hands and drink together?
Again, narrator,
please.
Yeah, just narrator fucking putting all this shit out there as if like we are in the mood to hear this right now.
And Mueller is sent by Reinhard to visit Iserlohn for official mourning.
Yes, to express his condolences. We kind of have an interesting one-to-one talk between Mueller and Julian. Kind of just having a brief chat, basically killing some time. Kind of formalities. There is a good bit where when Mueller meets with Frederica. Frederica is about to salute, but then remembers she is no longer military leadership. She is now civilian leadership.
Kind of like good, and she bows instead.
Yes. It's a good little detail.
I like those details in the show.
Yes. There's kind of a good bit with sending Mueller in general, because like Mueller is the right mix of like
diligent,
honorable, like he knows to say the right things. Like Mueller is not the kind of guy, like Mueller's not going to like start saying shit, like, is not going to start shit, right? He is not Bidfield. Right. Like he is respectful, but also he is like a major enough admiral in Reinhard's crew that like sending him is not an insult, like Reinhard could
not if they sent like
I don't know, Bidfield or something.
Actor. I was trying to think of someone other than Binfield.
I'm just saying, man, imagine they had fucking sent Binfield to that funeral. God damn. How long do you think before Binfield would have gotten shot?
But
anyway, so yeah, kind of Mueller, because and also like Mueller and Yang kind of have kind of a pseudo rivalry of sorts, because like right. Mueller is the one who saved Reinhard's life from Yang.
Yes.
And Yang is the one who said that, like, in a better world, Mueller would have been working for me. So, but yeah, so they have a one-on-one. I'm sure Mueller means well when he says this, but Mueller's like, it's not actually my authority to say, but just between you and me, if you want to surrender, like, I can relay that message to the Kaiser, and I'm sure he would be lenient with you. And Julian, fucking learn from the best, is like, tell me, Admiral Mueller, if Reinhard died tomorrow, would you change your flag? And
right.
Mueller is just left admitting, you're right. That was a really stupid thing for me to say. My apologies.
Yeah. Although I feel like that reply would have been very, as we said a few minutes ago, I think that reply would be very different depending on which admiral you asked.
Yeah, I think so. Again, like, I mean, You say that to Binfield, I think Binfield would have tried to start a fight, you know. But I mean, that's the thing, right? I said
Yeah.
like Mueller is the kind of admiral who is cool-headed enough that like when he gets the tables turned on him verbally like that, he knows well
Right.
enough to like take the L on that one.
Yes, and we also are notified. Schenkopp comes by to be like, "Hey, did you actually give everyone who's leaving permission to take stuff?
Yes, and Julian's like, yeah, but only stuff that we can't like, you know.
Only renewable resources."
Yes, yes, and that you know, this is the least we could do for them because we couldn't even afford pensions for them. So you
Yes.
know, just let them take what they need, you know, to hopefully live peaceful days for the rest of their lives. And you know,
Mm-hmm.
Mueller kind of sees all this, you know, and again, kind of speaks to like Julian as a leader that like he is not ashamed of admitting to Mueller, like, yeah, no, people are fleeing Iserlohn, you know, en masse. Like,
And some of these people will probably join up with you.
yeah,
But oh well.
yes,
I think I like this end of this exchange here. We get a like quick flashback to what Julian has learned from Imperial Admiralty, and like he says to Mueller what Kirky Eyes said to him many episodes ago.
yes,
Of we may end up, we'll probably meet again on opposite sides, but until then, please be well.
yeah, you know,
Which kind of like I took to be like, yes, Julian has learned a lot from the FPA people, but also in his travels, he has learned from people such as Valen and Kirky Eyes.
yeah. I mean, like,
in their own way.
yeah, I mean, like before he says that line, like we have a ghostly echo from Yang saying, you know, reminding us of that time he told Julian that like you need to see the whole world because like you're gonna see different values and different beliefs, but like you're also gonna understand like what are the things that like intrinsically make us human. And
Mhm.
again, you know, I think if anything could be said about Julian, if anything can be said is his best trait, is that Julian learns from the best. Like
Mhm.
he always takes lessons from the best places, and you know he with that kind of Mueller leaves, and we kind of return back to Reinhard. We find that he is taking care of a lot of civilian politics now from his bed because
Yes.
Reinhard strengthened Hilda's military authority. Because of Steinmetz's death, Hilda is now has taken the role that was originally assigned to Steinmetz. But
They kind of get into how like normally Hilda would be dealing with a lot of these like domestic matters, but because now she's officially in a military position, she refuses to deal with political stuff.
right, because once again, Hilda is is the smartest person in the room, and like Yang understands like the dangerous precedent she would set if she administered both military and civilian
Yes.
sectors. But again, unfortunately, that leads to Reinhardt being the one who has to stamp all these damn paperwork, which you know he doesn't
Right.
fucking love. But he, you know,
I
again,
think he understands, I guess.
yes,
but
we see him kind of dealing like they say that he makes a bunch of really fast reform. You know, again, autocracy leads to rapid reform.
I guess he says like, I need to make you prime minister or something so that I can actually ask you about this stuff.
Yes. He specifically, the narrator says, I didn't catch the line here, but he says that he specifically like made some changes to the government to basically like make him closer to the people or something. I'm not sure I quite understood that line. Did you
Like
happen to catch that?
the way they put it is kind of like he wants to his policy is like slowly abolishing the aristocracy and making it more like free for the average citizen to connect their opinion with like the Kaiser's dominance.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. I guess the thing is like I couldn't tell because like in many ways I could not tell if that was like I mean I feel like the charitable fanboy take is like Reinhardt is setting up the foundation of a liberal democracy, which I think is very much not the case. I think it is just once again like Reinhardt is trying to make his fucking like autocracy as like nice as possible with as like nice of a smile as possible, but at the end of the day it is still an autocracy.
Yeah.
But again, we find out that Reinhard, once again, despite just barely recovering from his sickness, is not eating.
Yeah.
Please eat, Reinhard. Emil tries to.
Emil, how dare you order me, the Kaiser, to eat?
Right. Like, you
How
know.
dare you?
Again, we see these
Oh, I
flashes
know.
of.
I didn't mean it, Emil.
Right. Yeah, the
You're
flash.
such a nice boy.
Yeah, get these flashes of bratty Reinhard. Again, the constant sickness, the lack of appetite. Like you
The fever dreams.
you can chalk this up to like, oh, he's just a workaholic, but I'm really beginning to suspect there might be something wrong with Reinhard. Anyways,
Yeah.
he gets one last message, which is that Streit comes in
Yes.
asking what to do with Steinmetz's will. We find out that Steinmetz's will, or closest thing related to a will, that he was in a relationship.
He left everything to one woman.
Yes, to one Gretchen von Eberhardt. But however, he did not marry her, and Reinhard is informed that he did not marry Gretchen because he said he would not marry until Reinhard got married. And Reinhard just once again is just like, why does everyone want me to marry? And it's like, motherfucker, maybe it's because you are still single and we still do not have a clear political lineage in place here. Like, Reinhard literally says, I don't care. Like, whoever should be leader should just be the strongest. Like, Reinhard, please, no, that's not how it works. Like, do you just want to kick off a violent civil war after you pass? Like,
for all the reform you're putting through for the government, and for as much as the narrator has occasionally piped in to say, and Reinhard was putting focus on the long-term stability of the empire, like, his actual actions on camera are just asking for a bloody succession crisis.
Right, because like one of the strongest things about democracy is that for better or worse, mainly for worse as of late, yes, is that we have a clear line of political succession.
Like how many people down do you have to? Dark thing for me to say, but how many people down do you have to shoot before we actually don't know who is next up in line?
I mean, yes, we actually. Well, I mean, I don't have it on hand. It's not something I can remember from off the top of my head. But my understanding is that the U.S. government has actually put thought into this, and it is actually like officiated that we have a clear line of political succession for the leadership of this country, going 12 steps deep. So there is this idea that even if DC itself was wiped out off the face of the planet, there would actually still be somebody who would actually be like the clear, like, legal successor to that lineage. But that's a problem. Is like, this is why kings exist. Like, say what you will about monarchies, but if nothing else, like, the reason monarchies exist is so that you have a clear line of like, okay, king is dead, who's next? His son. Okay, but even if the son sucks, at least you understand who is next. What Reinhard is doing is leaving it so vague that like in many ways, this kind of, I'm not going to go to a historical tangent on this again because, I think A, we're going to have better times to discuss this, but B, we are running long. But this, in many ways, this reminds me of like the death of Augustus in the Roman Empire. Like, he did technically designate like a successor, but like in many ways, it was such a half-hearted attempt that like a civil war was literally the only like logical thing that could happen when he passed away. Because, like, he did not have children. He did not, like, for all the things that, Augustus did to, like, improve and reform Rome, one of the things he did not do was, like, codify a clear line of succession. And the Roman Empire paid dearly for it. And, like, I fear that Reinhard is once again setting up for the exact same mistakes when he says, oh, like, he's pulling some fucking, like, Metal Gear Rising Senator Armstrong shit here, where he's saying, just the strongest will rise to the top. It's like, motherfucker, this is not your fucking libertarian enclave. This is a galactic empire. Like,
yes,
care.
Billions
of people depend on your decisions. Care a little bit about getting married and getting laid, if nothing else.
Yep, and, everyone starts pulling out of his own corridor. Yes. Reuenthal heads off to Heineken. Yep. Are you satisfied, Kaiser, as long as I'm merely a cog in your dominance?
Right, fucking Reuenthal, once again, despite literally being accused of treason like a month ago, is already back on his fucking treasonous bullshit. Like, you can already see the cogs turning in Reuenthal's brain. It was, for Reinhard to be strong, he needs a strong enemy. I could be that strong enemy. It's like, Reuenthal, please, you have to stop.
And Mittermeyer is like, boy, I hope nothing else bad happens in the next 6 months of the first year of Variety.
Also, by the way, Bear Lane, do you have a girlfriend?
You should get laid.
And fucking Bear Lane says, like, the fleet is my girlfriend. And Mittermeyer gives him
Like
the most fucking look I have ever seen from Mittermeyer. Just, like, the most, like, you didn't actually just say that, did you? Like,
I'm just following your example, Mittermeyer.
And Mittermeyer, like, literally shouts at Bear Lane saying, A, work on getting a girlfriend. B, work on your jokes. And it's just, but it was Mittermeyer.
I may have taught you tactics, but you're gonna have to study good jokes and find a girlfriend on your own, man.
Yes, Mittermeyer, as this episode kind of comes to a close, muses that, you know, in some ways, Yang is a martyr now. Like, things may be peaceful now. Things might be calming down for now. Like, Reinhard may have retreated from the Iserlohn corridor, but
now Iserlohn is a holy land for democracy.
Yes, and that the news will spread. The news will spread that Yang died a martyr in the name of democracy. Or he did not. He died half-drugged alone in basically a back alley of a spaceship. But people will eventually write the story. You know, I mean, just like Heinesen, people will eventually write the story that turns him into a legendary martyr. And then Mittermeyer says, once again, boy, I can't wait to see my wife. And I'm like, no, Mittermeyer, don't say that. But, and then this show pulls off the move, the cheapest fucking move that only this show could pull off.
Fucking looks at the portrait of his wife.
And then...
I'm so glad I'll be able to return to my lovely wife.
Yes. And then...
Credits. Yes.
Oh my god, dude! I set up the layup for you, and you just fucking let it fall like a fucking like a turd, man.
Yeah, man. I think I said out loud like, "Oh fuck off" when they did this, and they start playing the first season ending theme.
Yes,
Crossing the Bridge of Light.
Crossing the Bridge of Light. The ED from the first season that we have not heard over like 4 dozen episodes.
Right. I just said like, you sons of bitches.
You sons of bitches. Same, not just the song, the same sequence as well. And like now we are reminded of us joking at the end of our season 1 wrap-up podcast of how this ED would be a dark portent of events to come. And now the prophecy has been fulfilled.
We've come full circle.
Yang has disappeared from the ED for good.
Oh my god.
Leaving Julian alone in an empty galaxy.
What's the 4th opening ED gonna be?
I don't know, man. I hope the 4th ED doesn't even show Yang. I don't know if I could handle seeing Yang again. Like,
what about just the ghost Yang in the sky, smiling down?
Look, man,
smiling down like Goku.
Sure, if Yang wants to become a Force ghost for Julian, I'm all for it. But I don't think this is that kind of show. Anyways, we've been on for too long. But like, there is one
coming up next.
There is one topic we did want to get into at the end of this.
Correct. Yes, the final thing on my notes here: talk about Earth Cult and how they used to be funny.
Yeah, so we kind of wanted to get into a talk about, like, cults and, like, how people become radicalized and, like, the impact that has on, like, society. You know, this sounds like a very, like, big brain topic, but don't worry, we're not going to go nearly as in-depth as you fear. But in many ways, you know, obviously, like, again, this show was written, like, 30, 40 years ago. Like, obviously is not referencing our current events. But, like, fiction is...
what is it that they say? History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes.
Yes. That's a good way to put it, is that no matter what the era is, like, a show like Legend of the Galactic Heroes will always have political parallels with, like, the real-world events in society at the time. Because of its, like, extremely nuanced and, like, intimate, like, understanding of historical trends. And so we kind of want to talk about the Earth Cult in this regard, because, like, the Earth Cult as an entity is very laughable. We laughed at the Earth Cult for seasons.
These like goofy assholes in their fucking robes.
Their robes and their caves. Yes, it's just like, we all remember like their first reveal when we had that Emperor Palpatine motherfucker in that cave with the crystal ball,
Right.
fucking prophesizing the doom of Yang Wenli or whatever. And it's like,
Yeah.
we laughed because they're goofy. But like, it is that thing that like it is easy to forget, and in some ways, I wonder if this is intentional on the show's part, of like making the Earth Cult such a like ridiculous organization that we let our
Mhm.
guard down. We forget
Right.
how like how
Even though earlier in this very season we infiltrated their base and saw like the crazy shit they were doing.
right, like no matter how crazy that shit is, if it is being done with complete earnest, that is dangerous, and so despite the fact that they're doing these hilarious goofy things like drugging their believers and like fucking like collapsing the base on their own believers and like all this crazy ridiculous shit, like if these people truly believe in this stuff, that is actually more dangerous than like if they were just a regular old terrorist group, because like these are cults, these are cultists, like this is the same reason why like
It's easy to have like in a fantasy whatever. It's easy to have the generic villains be cultists. They're cultists. They're crazy. You don't have to feel bad about
right.
murdering scores of
But
them.
then you think a little bit more about that, and you realize that some of the most dangerous terrorist organizations in 2019 are cultish. I think the most like obvious example is like stuff like ISIS and the Taliban. Religious extremists in the Middle East. The idea that like they're far more dangerous than your regular guerrilla group, because they're not just fighting for ideology; they're fighting for like what they believe to be the fundamental fabric of the universe. And like when you believe that, you can be driven to do like truly insane and terrible things. But like
Right.
I think that like in many ways this can even be applied to like the rise of like the alt right, through
Yeah,
the
like
through the internet.
I don't even want to imply that like you only will end up this way if you're like some kind of idiot who will buy into whatever some cult selling. Like this happens to regular ass people.
Right. And it doesn't even need to be necessarily religious in nature. Like if there's this argued stance from like I think more moderate like more moderate ideologies that say that like, oh, if you really want to deal with like neo Nazis and alt right fuckheads and stuff, like just ignore them. Like laugh at them. They're goofy. They're laughable. Like they're just a bunch of angry teenagers in black trench coats. Like just laugh at them. They're ineffectual. They're impotent. Like if we just
Until they're shooting up a Walmart,
right until they are shooting up Walmarts and schools and churches and releasing like video manifestos of like their extremely dangerous beliefs. Like that is the thing. Like I think that like for years, like people like advocated this idea that if we just ignore them, they'll go away because what they want is attention. But like when they start taking lives, when they start killing people, like here's the thing, like these people are no longer just like pathetic internet sad sacks. Like there is a reason why these people should be called domestic terrorists, like who are like indoctrinated into a very cult-like mentality. Like it is easy to mock them, right? Like it's very easy to laugh at the idea. I still sometimes laugh at the idea of like, oh, like watching anime and like watching anime and talking on 4chan turns you into a school shooter is like a very like laughable concept. But like when it proves to be the truth time and time again,
right?
how laughable is it anymore? Like here's the thing. I'm not trying to sound hypocritical. Like I do think that like we are probably going to continue laughing at the Earth Cult.
Oh yeah,
Like because
we'll keep laughing at the Empire as well.
yes,
But
and like but I also like I think that what this
yeah,
show has done, and what this show has effectively reminded us is like even if we find their antics funny sometimes,
still have to take it
they
seriously.
must be taken seriously because they are capable of very real, very tangible harm in the society they exist in. And again, I'm not like I hope it doesn't sound like we're reaching too hard here. I would never try to imply, oh, Yoshiki Tanaka predicted the rise of the alt right or ISIS or whatever. Like at the end of the day, these are just
Oh, like
parallels. These are not. what are they?
Extremist groups existed in every period of time.
Yes, like these are not allegory; they are parallels, you know, and they are parallels that we have subjectively decided to make. And of course, I think it is valid to like both arrive at that conclusion, and I think it is valid to write it off. But
there's things in Legend of Galactic Heroes that are applicable to many different situations.
Yeah, and I think that like in many ways, like it is a very silly thing to say that like Legend of the Galactic Heroes has made us more politically and socially aware. But I feel like in some ways it has maybe opened our eyes to like concepts and things that we initially considered like laughable or unrealistic. But like the more we are forced to contend with both A, the events in the show, and B, how much they uncomfortably remind us of things that are happening in the real world.
It's given me like an extra vector to understand some of the things that are going on in reality.
Yeah,
I guess.
I think that's a good way to put it, right? Like I don't think any of us is saying, "Oh, like we became political because of Legend of the Galactic Heroes," but
I can relate situations that are occurring in reality to when something like that happened in Legend of the Galactic Heroes.
Yeah,
and like use the context of the show to help me better understand the context of reality.
And I think in many ways that kind of speaks to the strength of the show. Like, you know, I think that with these 3 episodes, you know, maybe this is big talk. Maybe I'll walk this back in like a year, but like I don't fucking know how anyone could ever arrive at any conclusion other than that Legend of Galactic Heroes is like the greatest piece of fiction that like has ever been written in like the history of mankind. Like okay, maybe I'll walk that back in like a week. Maybe I'll rewatch Gurren Lagann or something and I'll change my mind again. But,
sure. I mean, like, Granbelm Days tomorrow, man.
Yeah, we're gonna be watching Granbelm. Yes, Granbelm was the show that was gonna convince me. Oh shit. Fine. For a specific, like for a very specific lane of fiction, I think Legend of the Galactic Heroes is unsurpassed.
Sure.
I feel confident saying
as far as I know.
And I think with that, we're going to call this a podcast. So let's take care of some housekeeping. So as always, you can listen to our podcast and the rest of our stuff on theglorioblog.com. You can follow us at the Glorio Blog on Twitter. You can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, wherever podcasts are aggregated. You can listen to it on YouTube as well. You can watch Legend of the Galactic Heroes on High Dive and VRV. Maybe if you got some free time, check out our other podcasts, including the GLORIO Chat, where Iro and I rant about Granbelm for 30 minutes straight.
I mean, what, the past 2 podcasts have just been Fire Emblem 3 Houses and Granbelm?
Yes, because those are the highlights of the last month or so. If you want to listen to us talk about Evangelion, you can listen to Neon Genesis Evanglorio.
Just wrapped up.
Yeah, just wrapped up.
We've hit the end of Evanglorio.
Yeah, if you want to listen to these same voices talk about Evangelion for 4 hours, maybe check that out.
Really more like 3.5.
Fine. Our UK correspondents have started their own podcast, Glorious King of the Kaiju, where they talk about old school kaiju movies. I think a new one of those just came out recently.
And Ghidorah, the 3-headed monster.
Yeah, and I think that's going to do it. So,
tune in next time for Season 3 wrap-up. Yes,
so the next podcast you guys are going to be listening to is our Season 3 wrap-up podcast. Now, if you've been listening to us this long, you know that, like, as always, the first half will be just Iro and I talking about the final episodes of the season. That will be 85 and 86. And then the next section, we will be bringing on our 2 regular guests, Jell and Marlon, to kind of get the temperature of the room, everybody's thoughts on the season, the highlights, the lowlights. I suspect that podcast may just end up becoming a pseudo awake for the dearly departed young Wenli, but
Indeed.
I am working on some other topics to try and liven that up a little bit. But yeah, please do tune in for that one. Please look forward to that. That's always a fun one.
And thank you for listening and commenting.
Yeah, as always, thank you all for listening. We appreciate all the comments. Iro, thank you for accompanying me on this journey through thick and thin, through feast and famine.
Mm-hmm.
Through
Sorry
life
for
and death.
a couple times
It's fine. We're all
still here.
we're all still reeling. You know, we're all still reeling from the events that have happened, and you know, I'm just glad you're still here, Iro. And until next time, we will see you amongst the sea of stars.